Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in again. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that's topwaters. And more specifically, search bait topwaters. Not all topwaters are made the same, and if you throw the wrong topwater under the right conditions, you may not generate a bite. But if you throw the right topwater under those same conditions, you may have one of the best days of fishing of the year and have the potential of generating a really big bite. But I'm here to tell you, not all topwaters are made the same. They are meant to be used in completely different manners. So what I want to do today is talk about my 4 favorite search bait topwaters and tell you, why I think they're going to generate bites under circumstances and why you might not want to throw them under other, scenarios. So we're going to talk about those, but before I get into it, I do want to remind you that if you're looking for a little bit of help on your local lakes, check out the lake breakdowns that I do at fishthemoment.com. I pick out 40 waypoints for that specific time of year that you request and a whole bunch of different techniques to help you catch fish faster on your local lakes. It's a great way to help break down the lakes. Also, at the same time, if you want to support the channel, please do your shopping at Tackle Warehouse using my affiliate link that I provide in the description of the video. It's a great way to support the channel. All right, guys, so this is the time of year where topwaters are excelling. There really is, like, once you get water temp that is pushing 70 degrees or warmer, the fish are extremely active. They got to feed a lot, and they've come off, they've finished the spawn, and now they're chasing bluegill, they're chasing shad, they're chasing pretty much anything. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll push that forage species to the surface, and they're using the surface as a wall. So by pushing the bait fish up to the surface, the bait fish don't have as many options as to the direction that they go, and it gives the upper hand to the bass. So topwater becomes a really good presentation because a lot of fish are feeding on the surface, and at the same time, they have a hard time really figuring out whether the topwater bait is real or not. But that's only true if you're talking about a bait that moves at a fast pace. If you're throwing what I consider a target-oriented bait, so maybe like a popper, at that point, the fish can get a good look at it. It's still something they may have a hard time deciphering based on it being on the surface. But if you're throwing a fast-moving bait, which is what I consider a search topwater, the fish don't get a good look at it at all. It really provides a very similar silhouette on the surface as a dying bait fish or a fish that's on the surface. So it's really important to recognize the difference. I'll also say that since, this time of year where the water temps get warm, a lot of those fish are going to be chasing, fish that are on the bank, whether they're bluegill or just shad that are moving in and out based on the light periods. And at the same time, you may be sitting out in 100 feet of water, but because the shad are higher up and the bass are pushing them to the surface, a topwater bait could be a great choice. So you're probably going to be fishing a topwater bait almost anywhere. Literally, you could be throwing it in the middle of the lake if you've got shad and fish that are being busted on the surface. So a topwater bait from now, early summer, all the way through into the fall months is going to be a key bait for this time of year. But if you're not fishing targets, so what I mean by targets is a laydown tree, a dock, a stump, if you're not making precise casts with a topwater bait, you're probably looking at covering a lot of water. So you don't want to throw what I would consider a target-oriented bait, your poppers, your prop baits, anything that's along that where you're looking at moving your bait at a slow pace. In this case, what you're going to be looking for is a bait to cover a lot of water. So maybe you're fishing big flats. Maybe you're just looking at going down a bank of riprap, or you're fishing schooling fish. The key here is a lot of times you want to make long casts and work your bait quick back to the boat. That's the other big difference between a target-oriented bait and a search bait. A search bait, you're working that bait pretty much back to the boat. You may work it, halfway to all the way back to the boat versus a target-oriented bait like a popper where you're maybe only making 5 or 6 pops and you're reeling it up, making a whole nother cast. So there's a big difference here because with a search topwater bait, you can cover way more water. So you're going to put your bait in front of more fish, and you're going to be able to find areas where there are more fish using that area. And then at that point, maybe you only get 1 or 2 bites on the bait you're throwing, but it may allow you the confidence to slow down and throw a wacky rig or flip a jig or do something like that. So it's really important to choose the correct topwater bait to the conditions that you're fishing. And I've got 4 different ones here that I almost always throw, but the difference is the conditions or the cover that I'm fishing. So the first bait I'm going to start with is just a head and spook. This is a 1 knocker. This is a regular one. In either case, both of these are great baits. The spook has been around for I don't know how long, 50, 60 years. It is an absolute phenomenal bait that has withstood the test of time. The key here with a bait like this is you can throw it a 1/4 mile. So if you're fishing schooling fish or you're on a giant flat, you know, that is 10 foot deep with some scattered weeds, some scattered rock, and you're just looking at covering water, a big walking topwater bait where you can make really long casts and you can work it really quickly back to the boat, just walking the dog. Maybe occasionally you put a harder twitch in or you pause it. The reality is you're really working that bait pretty quick back to the boat where you're just constantly retrieving it, putting the motion in with your rod tip, but you're looking at covering water. So you want to have some big walking bait. You know, in my opinion, this is one of the best ones that's made on the market, and it's great for really open water fishing. The problem here is you can run into instances where you've got some floating weed, you've got some debris in the water, and it's fouling your hooks, and therefore you're not bringing your bait back clean. So when that happens, usually what I'll do is I'll switch over to a buzzbait. A buzzbait is a very weedless bait that will come through that stuff relatively clean, assuming that it's not like floating debris. If you've got floating eelgrass or a bunch of slime, that can get caught on the prop. But this is a much more weedless presentation than throwing a walk the dog style topwater bait. But you can cover a ton of bait with this. This is the one that I like. It's the Dirty Jig Scott Canterbury, and I like it because you can slide a bait up over the hook keeper here. And in my opinion, when you slide a bait like this Berkeley the Deal up over it, it actually makes it even more weedless. It comes through the weed better, and you don't get anything fouling up on a big lead head. Plus, it runs through cover better because if you've got weight that's transferred all the way back, almost back to where the tip of the hook is, when that happens, if I hit a log or hit something solid, the bait will naturally want to ride up because I have more weight in the back. If I have just a single lead head here and I hit it, now my main contact point is the head, and it's harder to get that head to come up and over than a bait like this where I've got weight that's transferred all the way back through the hook shank. So if I'm fishing thicker cover, so not thicker cover, if I'm fishing cover, so if I'm fishing, you know, maybe some a big stump flat, maybe there's some isolated grass patches, a couple of random lily pads, that type of thing, where if I'm making a long cast and I can't see some of that when I make the cast and it's fouling a walking bait, that's when I'll throw the buzzbait because I can make really long casts with it and cover a lot of water. Now, if I've gotten to the point where this is starting to foul, that's when I'll go with something like the Buzzin' Speed Toad. This Buzzin' Speed Toad is just a toad style bait where I can rig it, Texas rig it, and make long casts, but it's going to be completely weedless, and I can reel that through that thicker cover. It's allowing me to fish some of those big weed flats or big pad fields where I'm really trying to find the concentrations of fish. And a Buzzin' Speed Toad is a great way to do that. And it's going to be weedless, so you're not going to have the issues of the hang-ups that you'd get with a buzzbait. So those 3 baits really cover the gamut. Now I will say there's one other bait that I really like to work in for fishing shallow flats or long stretches of shoreline. And that's the Berkeley Chapel. You can see this one is one that I've really worked over, and I actually use this as a practice one now because the hooks, you can see I've cut the tips off the hooks. But this is a very similar bait to your buzzbait. The difference here is if I'm fishing open water and I want to cover a lot of water, that's when I'll go with the Chapo. If I've got some of that floating debris again, or just some grass mixed in where the Chapo won't come clean, I'll throw the Buzzbait. The difference between the walking bait and the Chapo is more for me about covering long stretches of shoreline where I'm really moving the bait quick, because I'm going to probably be moving this bait at about 2 times the speed as a walking bait. Even though I'm moving a walking bait quick to cover water, the Chapo is really the bait that's going to allow me to cover a ton of water. So that's really the big difference. I can still throw this on the same flats where I'm throwing the walking bait. I just find that the walking bait will generate better strikes on those deeper flats. And I think a lot of it is because it's a little slower and I can work a little bit more irregular motion. But when it comes to fishing like a stretch or riprap or something where you're just getting on the bank and going for a long distance, that's where the Chapo comes into play. All 4 of these baits are all about covering water. You know, I could throw a popper in a lot of those same areas and I would generate some strikes. The difference is the popper is only going to allow me to cover 1/10 of the same amount of water as these other baits. So if I don't have a target that I want to cast at, or I don't have a really specific zone that I know the fish are in, you're way better off throwing one of these search baits over what I consider a target-oriented topwater bait. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Don't just pick up any topwater and think, hey, I didn't get bit on a popper, topwater's off today. You want to make changes in your topwaters based on the conditions that you're fishing. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, share it on your social media pages, and stay tuned. Another video coming out tomorrow.